Did you know that there are two different types of introverted thinking? And if you don't know which variation you use, then your self-development progress and your ability to understand other people is vastly diminished. In this video, I'm going to go through decode your personality, go beyond Myers-Briggs with 64 brain-based subtypes. Hopefully the green screen didn't eat up the image of the book. I'm going to be reading through Dario Nardi's description of introverted thinking and the two variations of it, analytic and holistic. This is my first time reading through it. I'm an INFP. Introverted thinking is my 8th function. This is the 8th video in this series, and we will see how well I do with introverted thinking. Introverted thinking, TI. Introverted thinking, TI, has two sides, analytic and holistic, aka yang and yin respectively. In a nutshell, analytic TI is critical, fixed, and at times aggressive around ideas. Say something the wrong way and this person will correct you. The flavor is easy to spot. In contrast, holistic TI has a passion for a diversity of ideas, methods, principles, practices, hypotheses, frameworks, designs, and such, with a flexibility around them, with an inner drive to make sense of it all, and with a lot of discussion, questions, experiments, variations, allowances, and so on. Since everyone has TI in some way, a bias for one side can explain a bit, particularly for people who do not favor TI, yet seem caught in its grip. Ooh. So he could be specifically talking about extroverted feelers being caught in the grip, as in their inferior function, the fourth one in their cognitive function stack, has too strong of a pull on them, and they start getting overly critical against people. They start hating on themselves in a very critical way as well, or they just vastly contort information in order to fit the plan that they have for other people. So there are a couple important things to talk about before we continue on with this. And the first is that I've heard so many people since going through this series saying that, I thought I was this personality type, but it didn't quite fit. Like something didn't quite line up with all the stereotypes that were out there, all the explanations that other people made. And through understanding the two variations of each of the cognitive functions, you can start to see like, oh, actually, I just do it this way. I do it the holistic side instead of the analytic side. And everybody seems to talk about the analytic version, or vice versa, depending on the cognitive function itself. Some are more prevalent in the holistic side, some are more prevalent in the analytic side in terms of the explanations online. But it is really important to know also within yourself. Because if part of you is like pushing against the analytic version, for example, then you're missing out on so much that you could bring to the world, so much depth of understanding of yourself. Like, why do I struggle with this aggressively correcting around ideas? Why does that trigger me so much? Well, maybe it's because there's an analytic struggle, conflict. And once you clear that up, then you free up your energy to be more of you, to be more holistic, to stop wasting time, energy, and effort on struggle, on hate towards yourself, hate towards other people. And we all know that hate leads to suffering. So once you can stop suffering, then you can be you, and you can show up in the way that the world needs, playing your character class to the best. Let's get back into this though. Analytic, Yang TI, the critic. Analytic TI is stubborn on principles. There's a singular, most worthy framework or approach that explains everything, at least within a particular domain, though this TI user tends to extend their area of expertise far and wide to cover as much of life as possible. In a sense, can't math or chemistry, economics or literature, architecture or statistics be used to address anything and everything, at least by analogy? And with their expertise, they have a strong drive and assertiveness, not just to explain things, but to win at the game of life. I am very unassertive when it comes to information. Usually I can't even process if it is correct or incorrect unless it's like an internal sensation, a kinesthetic feeling that like this is wrong. But in terms of facts or logical truth, it's very difficult for me to parse that. So I used to lucid dream, and somehow when I taught my wife how to do it so she could stop having nightmares, I like gave her the power and I didn't have it anymore. And when I start to think about lucid dreaming, or I reflect on how did I not catch that was a dream, because it's so bizarre, so out of the ordinary. Think of that as my introverted thinking, of like just not spending the time to be rigorous with my logic and think like, does this really make sense right now? If it doesn't, then something is wrong and something likely should be fixed. I tend to not have that. It's really difficult for me to proofread things as well, because it just kind of all blends and I'm like, hey, I got the feel of it. I understand it. Instead of me being able to pinpoint out specific words that should be improved or are inaccurate. Using analytic TI, the person aims to define things precisely and is delighted to figure out a perfect unified theory of everything. Often these folks also have an agenda, maybe even unconscious, to provide expert guidance, whether for their family or an organization or for all of society. By the way, that's where the opposite function FE comes in. Using their expertise, the person aims to guide others and answer the central questions or tasks of life. In practice, the results are usually more modest, but still quite potent. They can act as reliable experts in a particular discipline, and they bring a lot of active problem-solving power. I definitely love the idea of a unifying theory that connects everything. That is what I struggled with for so long with the Path of Heroes Academy. It was like, I know NLP and hypnosis and cognitive functions and story and character design can all be put together in a way that is focused on self-development and self-understanding. And it took me 5 years, 6 years maybe, to process it. I wasn't doing it in the most efficient way, I guarantee that. But it took me a long time because I knew that there were some connections that I just needed to like figure out more things about this domain and this domain and this domain, and then I could put them together. And so that feels kind of like this, although I would have assumed that would be the holistic side. And I do love that Dario Nardi mentioned the opposite function, FE, coming in a way to provide for their family or an organization or society. A lot of people seem to like put these cognitive functions just in silos, even me when I'm explaining it sometimes, because we need to focus on part of it, right? But it's a dichotomy. There are two ends to this spectrum, and we need both. And oftentimes the goals of one are supplemented or supplementing the other side of the spectrum there. So like introverted thinking, as he mentioned, making sense of things, like giving a clear, deep understanding of how things work, and then sharing that with the world. That's how we have these theories and our understanding of life and quantum physics and all these really important things that can help humanity progress. And so there is that other side. Same for me as an INFP. I want to live according to my introverted feeling, to my values, to what's important to me. But in order to make that happen, I kind of also have to do extroverted thinking things. I have to make sure that I have my life organized, that I have a structure, a schedule, that I'm making an impact on the world. And also by doing that, then I feel more fulfilled in an FI type way. A tip off to this subtype: they like to correct errors. That includes their own, at least with respect to the central framework they rely on. And of course, that includes others' poor thinking and wrong approaches. Thus, they can easily come off as difficult to talk to, obnoxious, know-it-alls, or thick-headed. Damn. They often have an authoritative voice tone, steady and forceful. Conversely, listening is also a big challenge because they are usually focusing on how the other person's input fits into their expert model, not for what that person's model is. In a situation, they focus on what they see are the relevant variables. What doesn't match is discarded, force-fit into something they know, or ignored. And because this TI user has a lot of experience with their favored area, their analysis from that point on is very likely correct, at least in their mind. The process is self-reinforcing. Thus, they can get stuck and not see what they're missing, particularly when a base assumption is off. There's so much to talk about in that paragraph. When I do personality profiling, one thing that I often look for, if they're a TI user, is them correcting me. So sometimes when I explain something or when I ask a question, they're like, can you explain that again? Or do you mean this? Or, you said this, but are you really talking about this? And they're trying to understand more clearly the words, right? One of my ENTP friends, I told him some word and he's like, I need to know the etymology of this word. I just have to know it. And he definitely seems to be more on this side in terms of his directness and ability to correct things. It's like a virus scanner on your computer, right? It's just sifting through all these lines of code and it's picking out what is incorrect, the bug, the flaw in the system, and fixing it. Or that's the intention. I also know from Dario Nardi's brain scans and research there, he has mentioned before that introverted thinkers sometimes have a difficulty with listening. And introverted feelers too, in a way. Introverted feelers often get into flow through listening, like this holistic listening state where we want to understand the person's intentions and their model of the world, their identity. But once we've made a decision, then it just shuts off and it stops listening. And I think introverted thinkers do this as well, maybe a little bit faster because it's clearer maybe and easier to point out mistakes and flaws in logic than it is to understand a person's character. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm giving too much weight onto introverted feeling. But for somebody who uses introverted thinking, I would imagine that it's easier to parse that. Like, what? That's blatantly wrong. And then stopping listening from there because the person has proven themselves to give bad information or to believe bad information. Whereas for me, as an introverted feeler, they have to do or say something that triggers one of my values, and then it shows that it doesn't line up with me. And I might go against that, or I might just let them live on their stupid way. And one more thing that he said was about their analysis from that point on is very likely correct, at least in their mind. And there's an issue when their base assumption is off. This is the importance of getting into your auxiliary function. For ISTPs and INTPs, if you are only processing or doing so much processing with introverted thinking and you're not putting yourself into novel contexts, novel experiences, new situations, learning new information intentionally, doing new physical activities, taking apart machines and putting them back together that you've never experienced, then you're going to say, well, this is the way that the world works. Without enough experiential data, then that is always going to be correct. And it's important to challenge ourselves on those. Same with me as an INFP. I've had to go to Japan and Korea and push myself in all these strange different directions so that I could understand more about my values and who I am as a person, my identity, who I can become. And the same is true for you as an introverted thinker. It's not easy. But that's not what we're here for, right? Overall, these TI users are confident. They are hard to intimidate, particularly when they focus on understanding how power dynamics work between people. They also easily resist a lot of impulsive groupthink and mental missteps that easily mislead others. They can respond quickly to answer a problem and often do so with a firm voice and solid body language. Thus, they are often successful, at least as they define success to be. That's super cool. Analytic, critic, TI, being able to stand up against groupthink and say what's true, at least from their understanding of it. Hopefully, it's true. The cool thing about all these cognitive functions is like you spend so much time developing your dominant function that it is like a superpower. As an introverted thinker, your intellectual rigor is so calibrated and so good and likely it's going to be accurate. Now that doesn't mean don't check, right? Don't do your due diligence. But you've spent so much time in that zone. So be proud of it. Be happy about it. Like for me, introverted feeling stuff, I've spent 40 years doing introverted feeling stuff. That's way more time than most other people. And so I have some skills, abilities, understanding that I can bring to the table that other people can't. Holistic, yin TI, the systemist. Systemist TI takes a holistic approach. These TI users talk about taking different points of views, shifting their approach or perspective, using multiple models, finding patterns in chaos, and so on. So they're not married to just one model of the world. Rather, they notice interactions around them, this, that, and the other things, and they pick up on likely significant factors. They can walk through the woods, so to speak, and find themselves analyzing things in 5 different ways. I like it already. Could be my extroverted intuition, because it does have that feel of loving this breadth of different ideas and patterns and wanting to connect them all. So let's see how it differs. These TI users have a fluid approach. They may say, here are a few relevant models we can look at to clarify and gain understanding. They refer to broad themes over rigid definitions. And they very much notice how things shift, scale, or develop. Among human beings, for example, there is the individual psychological system, the family system, and the tribe and nation systems. Holistic TI is comfortable holding different models around these and analyzing how they're all interconnected without trying to force fit everything into a favorite model. The way they apply principles also tends to be organic. They invite discussion, and along the way they may notice a new point they had not considered, and they are willing to set aside an existing viewpoint for a moment to try on that new point. Thus, unlike analytic TI users, they don't come off as insulting. Well, they may accidentally, at times, anyone can, but because they are more open, people feel more interested and welcome. Finally, this approach fosters a bit of creativity, though it can take time for an innovation to bear fruit. One of my core perspectives on self-development is that we get stuck in one frame, one viewpoint. We tunnel vision on one thing, either if it's with your cognitive functions, you get stuck in one function and you're not taking in all the other 7 functions. Or even if you're doing 2, you're still missing out on 6 others. And in order to solve our problems, we need to be more resourceful. We need to be able to take into account all these different character classes and say, actually, this is probably the best one for the job. Maybe it's not my natural approach to life, but it's likely going to succeed more easily than this other one. An example I often use is doing math with my feelings. Introverted feeling, specifically, is not a great function for doing math. When people are in spelling bees, like they have a process that they do. They take a picture of the word. They color code the word into the different syllables. Okay? They're actually looking up and to the left, usually, depending on how their brain is wired, and they are reading back the word. That's why they can do it backwards as well. Now, there might be a kinesthetic check to say, yep, that's correct. And there probably is, but that should not come before the other proven methods and models. So this seems to be related to holistic systemist TI, because it's saying that there are all these different models and you can use them. This one might be better, this one might not be. You combine these two, or you take from this one field and cross-pollinate into the other field, and you're going to have a more appropriate approach. When they're less mature, holistic TI users can be really scattered with no clear expertise, much less goals. There is only a weak inner push to success. They may allow themselves to be carried off in whatever direction the rivers of life take them, with a bunch of ideas floating around. Maybe they dig into various ideas here and there, first one thing, then another, and because analytic versus holistic is about development, any TI user may fall into this space over time. And if they use this space to actively explore, experiment, and educate themselves, they can really grow in their expertise and creativity. Being aware of our patterns and where we are and our hero's journey is really important. We will always go through these patterns. And if you are stuck, then likely you need to learn a skill, or you need to set off to the other world. You need to do something differently than what you're doing now. And it is often very difficult for us to have awareness, to know that we've been stuck, until eventually we just kind of wake up and we're like, what have I been doing for the past 5 years, 10 years, decades? That's a scary feeling. And that's part of what I try to do with this RPG analogy to life. Life is a game. There are so many ripe metaphors and analogies within that analogy that treat it as you need to be growing. You need to set off to tackle new quests, to fight new dragons, to explore, to loot new treasures. And through doing that, you level up, you gain XP. And you get new loot and allies and friends. It's just really important. And it's scary. It's scary to look back on your life and say, I thought I was going to be farther along than I am now. What should I do? Sorting flavors of TI. The contrast of TI flavors is particularly fascinating. I remember sitting at a lunch table in 1996 with David Kiersey Sr., who wrote Please Understand Me, with Marilyn Bates. Linda Behrens was also there, as she had organized the event. Both have INTP preferences. David Kiersey exemplified analytic TI, while Linda Behrens exemplified holistic TI. And it was odd because David Kiersey espoused a philosophy around personality that is a holistic philosophy. But he himself was not holistic, at least not that I detected. Admittedly, that was the only time I met him, but there definitely was a contrast. At some point, we've all seen the differences between these two versions of TI. That helps. As someone who knows a lot about Linda Behrens and David Kiersey, well, a lot as in stalked them, so thank you for that one. The two flavors respond to stress differently. Analytic TI tends to use caustic humor and argue when feeling threatened or not taken seriously. They will be quick to reply with rhetorical tricks, change the goalposts of an argument, and so on to maintain a sense of superiority. In particular, a reflex kicks in. Until a foreign idea is validated on their terms, it is harshly judged as false. Everything can become a game for them. In contrast, holistic TI users tend to disintegrate under stress. They are already juggling many different models, definitions, ideas, and so on. It's a messy web. Then, when stressed, they may get clumsy, cry profusely, ramble, retreat in silence, suffer brain fog, or otherwise temporarily fall apart. I know I'm an INFP, but the analytic version does not resonate with me, at least under stress. And this is one killer way to understand your personality type, is to look at what happens when you get really stressed out. And you have to know a lot about personality type in order to do this, or work with somebody who does. But if you can see, like, INTPs under grip, this is how they act. You know, ENFJs under grip, this is how they act. Sometimes they can point out to you, like, oh, yeah, that's me. That's what happens. That's how I really connected with my Enneagram type. Enneagram type 9 was because of their reaction to anger, and how I noticed I was self-narcotizing. I was numbing myself to emotions. Like all the functions, TI is a way to construct and maintain ego. For both variants, when they mature, they find a balance between confident expertise in their domain and humility in the face of everything else that they don't really know, including other approaches to their own domain. This brings wisdom and a strength of character. The person can step forward and think, I truly am an expert in this area here, and I am also open-minded and willing to learn. For analytic TI, the trick is to keep questioning their underlying paradigm, and for holistic TI, it is to locate and work with one. I feel for you guys. That's a struggle. Both sides of that. Like, if you are analytic TI and you show up, you know your stuff. You've spent so much time, energy, focus. You've been in your mage's tower, for example, studying. You know your field. But then to continuously question that underlying paradigm and say, is it true? Am I right? That hurts. That hurts the ego. Because what if you find out that for the past 20 years you believed this to be true, and actually it's this? What does that mean about you as a person? This is the type of stuff I think about all the time for myself, in terms of, like, if I do something that goes against one of my values, what does that mean about me as a person? Who am I? I'm somebody who can do this type of bad thing, so that must mean I'm a bad person. So I would imagine for you, hopefully I'm not implanting this idea, but if that did happen, then you would be like, well, if I can believe the false thing to be true, then maybe I'm not as smart as I thought I was. Or maybe you go on this catastrophizing Ferris wheel. I was once on a Ferris wheel with my aunt, and we went, and when it was at the top, it stopped. And it was an open, gated one. So, like, there was a fence around my car, but it was open, gated, right in the center. And I was young enough that I was slipping out of my seatbelt, and I was holding myself to maintain my life, to survive. And my aunt she was laughing. She was just there, this is funny. As I'm like, I'm going to die if I slip out of this. Maybe that's what it's like. And then for holistic TI, again, that must be difficult to locate and work with just one model for understanding, because it can feel like all of them fit. Like, well, this could work, this is a good one. Maybe if I just study more and learn more, then I'll find the puzzle piece to make all of this make sense. And it's this endless surface level exploration. And I say surface level, for you it's probably deeper than most people's surface level, but it's still not, it's T-shaped, right? In this way, not this way. And that can lead to a lot of wasted time and energy and effort. Now, the cool thing is when you're like, okay, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to deal with the resources that I have right now, and I'm going to apply them. What ways can I apply this model to fix this, and this model to fix this, and this one? And then how can I combine these two and put them together to come up with a solution? And then you get on that endless ability to problem solve. And that's super cool. I want to know your experience as an introverted thinker. Which variation of introverted thinking do you use? And what are some examples of it in your life? Because if you share those with us, then we can all build on this hive mind of understanding how to improve ourselves through our personality type and live a better life. Good luck, have fun. Peace.